Hello, my fellow viewers, subscribers. This is Supercholatemilkshake, and I am here talking about the Nintendo Switch 2 again. Okay, so first of all, if I have to say that my opinion has changed just a bit on the Nintendo Switch 2, I still think that $375 is still a decent asking price for it, and I do think that Mario Kart World is not justified for $80, even though there has been quite a few people who actually stepped out and said that actually it should be higher if it was actually calculated with inflation properly. So I guess there's that, but, you know, neither here nor there. The real truth is, and please don't hate me for this, I actually do not mind these specs. And this is me talking about as a developer and actually a bit of a gamer as well, because tell you the truth, well, system power doesn't really necessarily matter. It's more about what you can do with the system is more what really matters. Because, I mean, seriously, I've seen some phenomenal things come from the NES, the SNES, the N64, the GameCube, the Wii, the Wii U, you know, consoles like that. And heck, even the Switch still is pulling out quite a few surprises with us. So, of course, to say that the Nintendo Switch 2 is pretty weak is a bit of an understatement, because, again, weak hardware isn't really necessarily a hindrance, per se. It's really more of just a limitation to work around. And that's something that I think a lot of people really don't feel like they understand, really. Limitations are never bad. In fact, if anything, they're good because they encourage you to think outside of the box. They encourage you to think a lot more. They encourage you to figure out a good workaround, or at least a decent solution that will work for the time being. So that's exactly the reason why I am not bothered by these specs whatsoever that actually have just appeared of recent. Now, of course, as we all know, the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be more powerful than the original Nintendo Switch because, duh, it's going to be. But I was actually kind of surprised to figure out that it wasn't all that much more powerful. Like, I think the only significant jump here is the amount of RAM, like from 4 gigabytes to 12 gigabytes. It's like 3 times the amount of RAM. And also jumping from DDR4 to DDR5, which, you know, is also a massive leap too, because DDR5 is a lot faster than DDR4. I would still say that, honestly, what we're getting here is pretty respectable, and what we have to work with isn't all that bad, because you know what? 9 gigabytes, that's easy to work with, okay? If you know what you're doing, then you definitely know it's easy to work with 9 gigabytes. And then, of course, you know, when it comes down to the clocks and the cores, first of all, with the CPU clocks, I found it very weird, okay? This is the first thing that I actually found as strikingly weird, but it's weaker in docked mode than it is in mobile mode. Now, I don't know why Nintendo decided to set it up like this. I don't know if it's because, well, having more strength coming in mobile mode would help with saving power later on, or something like that. Well, I mean, sure, for the GPU clocks, I guess it does kind of make sense in a way, because they're just trying to balance stuff out here. Because, I mean, if anything, if I would have to say anything, the thing that would probably take the most power would be the GPU. Though, granted, I'm not a professional on this, but most of the time, it's like, whenever you see, like, one of those more higher-end, fancier GPUs, you always see, like, those 6-pin or 8-pin connectors plugged into them. That basically is delivering a whole bunch of power to it, because those are higher-end GPUs, they have way more to run, and they can't just run off the motherboard. So, I guess in this case, maybe that might be what they're trying to do here, is that they're trying to alleviate how much power the GPU is pulling when in handheld mode, which, you know what, I don't think is necessarily a hindrance anyway, because the CPU may now start carrying it in mobile, which is probably the wise reason why it's clocked up a bit more in mobile. Though, granted, I will admit, the CPU clocks are a little bit lower overall when it comes down to the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1, but again, I think I probably might have mentioned this before, the more cores probably help stretch some of that out. I mean, tell you the truth, yeah, because this is something that I actually did kind of learn switching from my old compact laptop over to my HP laptop, which, of course, if you are longtime viewers, you probably already know about my compact laptop, and most of you already pretty much know about my HP laptop, which is my bench system right now. My compact laptop had like 2 gigahertz of processing power, but my HP laptop only had like maybe 1.4 gigahertz of processing power. However, my compact only had 1 core to it, and my HP had 4. So yeah, and when it comes down to it, the HP was much more powerful than the compact ever was. So when it comes down to it, yeah, I think stretching it out amongst the 4 cores it was definitely helped out with most of that power issues, and tell you the truth, I think that's exactly what's going on here. So, because of the fact that there's more cores, we're operating the whole system and running the whole kit and caboodle, like, I guess there's really little to no reason to have it clocked at a higher speed than what the Nintendo Switch 1 is already clocked at. And, that's also great, too, because that also means that it reduces a bit of power. It also pretty much takes a bit less. It also happens to be like it takes a little bit less time when it comes down to loading things, because then of course you can load up multiple different things with the different CPUs, and of course, not to mention, it can also run multiple different processes at once, which is fine too, which is part of the reason why it says 2 cores are available to the system and 6 cores are available to the developers, which by the way is completely fine. That's a fine limitation to work with anyway, because right now, I have my virtual machine pretty much set up for like 8 gigs of memory and 6 of the system cores that I have right now, so pretty much it's already aimed towards Switch 2 specs anyway, so it doesn't matter. Then of course the amount of CUDA cores, like, sure, that's actually fine too. I don't think it's really necessarily that much of a hindrance either, because again, it's not about what kind of hardware it is, it's about what you do with it, and that's what some people really do need to understand. It's, again, something that I think I have tried to talk to people about and they still refuse to get. Optimization is a lot more of a key item here, rather than being, making whatever best game you possibly can make with whatever you can, with whenever you can, Like, actually, tell you the truth, this is one of the big things that made a lot of people freak out when a whole lot of major AAA developers out there started switching over to Unreal. Because, well, sure, Unreal is a fantastic game engine, don't get me wrong. What you can pull off of it is absolutely amazing from a development standpoint. And, from a gaming standpoint, it probably looks really fantastic too. But that promise comes with a whole bunch of hindrances, and there are a bunch of channels that have exposed most of these hindrances. I probably won't go through all the details and lists, but I think one of the biggest issues is that it does make developers a lot more lazier, because there's a lot of whole other subsystems and subsets, unoptimized models, unoptimized geomeshes, unoptimized textures, just running inside the background, which ends up taking, well, not just hard drive space, but RAM space, GPU power, CPU power, all those elements that could have been actually used to making the game run a lot more solid, a lot more quicker, a lot more faster. And see, I think that's something I think Nintendo definitely... This is something that Nintendo has pretty much had down pat for pretty much the entirety of their life cycle. Game Freak is probably the only part of Nintendo that doesn't have this figured out yet. But then, of course, the common statement is Game Freak is lazy. And honestly, I agree with that common statement. Like, it is a common core theme for Game Freak to just copy and code and not even do that well. So, again, something that I will say is that actually this doesn't bother me at all. In fact, when it comes down to it, I am actually kind of surprised with the fact that they did that kind of jump, but it wasn't that big of a jump. Like, I still see Nintendo still being Nintendo here, where they're trying to limit as much as they possibly can, and that's fine, too, because, here's the thing, too, because, like, if you were to put, like, the entire hardware spec of, like, a PS5 Pro into a Nintendo Switch 2, I'm pretty sure the dumb thing would melt inside your hands. Like, we're miles away from the type of cooling technology that, well, would allow for a handheld version of the PS5 Pro, which is part of the reason why PlayStation has their little Portal device, which basically is nothing more than just a cloud-based gaming system that allows you to connect to your own PlayStation 5. In this case, for Nintendo, basically they had the console right there, and this is also something that I've put up the debate, too, for myself. And you know what? Again, this is also something that also makes it a harder sell for the Valve Steam Deck. I get that the Steam Deck is not a bad piece of hardware, but at the same time, there's still limits to what it can do. Like, it chugs with certain games. And there are some games that don't even run on it at all. Part of it's probably just the Linux and Proton limitations, and, of course, with issues with, of course, DDRM and, maybe not DDRM specifically, but I'm pretty sure there are some forms of DDRM that don't really necessarily work with it. And then, of course, not to mention, we also have issues with... Oh, I can't think of it Anti-cheat. There we go. We have issues with anti-cheat too, which of course, also prevents games from running on, or certain games from running on Linux systems. Does that mean that the Valve Steam Deck isn't a capable piece of hardware? No, it doesn't, but it means that it is still limited on what it can do. And again, I think that's something that a lot of people also need to keep in mind. And there's some people out there who go like, well, I can also stream my games onto the Steam Deck. Can I discuss to you about your life choices? Because you know what? You can stream your games to your cell phone. You can stream your games to your laptop. You could also stream your games to, like, the Android tablet or, like, an iPad, You could stream your games to... basically you can stream games to your toaster now these days. Because you know what? That's how streaming works. It's supposed to allow lower power devices play higher end games, but from a cloud on a server somewhere else. But see, that's the thing, like, I don't want it on a cloud and a server somewhere else, because there's other faults that could happen. Like, for example, what if the internet were to go out? Or you were in a place that had some really spotty reception. Or, like, if your phone service went out, if you're going to be using your phone as a hotspot. Well, then, what are you going to do then? You're not going to be able to play that high-end game as much as you want to. And see, that's the thing I would put in as an argument for the Nintendo Switch 2 being a much more powerful console. And in fact, if anything, if you really want a truly powerful portable gaming system, I would just buy a gaming laptop, period. Like, I know it's a lot of money, but you know what? At the same time, you basically have everything that you need right there. You have your keyboard, you got a mouse, well, touchpad still, doesn't matter. You could also buy a mouse optional too. Those things aren't too expensive. And yeah, you could play games on a gaming laptop directly there without having to worry about any cloud services, any spotty internet connections whatsoever. And see, that's the thing I would make with the Nintendo Switch 2 as well, because it seems like most of the games are being ran locally, whether if you downloaded it from the internet or not. And I understand that there's a lot of people who are also bringing up the Nintendo Switch 2 key cards. Okay, fine, whatever. I think some people are making too much of a stink about it more than others. And yes, sure, I get the idea. The long term of the Nintendo Switch 2 key cards are, well, not exactly great. Because, if Nintendo were to shut down the Nintendo Switch 2 servers, like years and years and years later, there's nothing that you can do to redeem those games if you just buy the key cards. They're going to be nothing more than e-waste. I get that. But, like, right now, I don't think they're necessarily the worst idea in the world, but they're not exactly the best idea either. I don't think they're the best implemented either, especially if you wanted to go off of what most of the internet is saying. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who are calling me a Nintendo Switch 2 defender, and you know what, fine, go ahead and call me that, but I'm really not trying to defend Nintendo 100% here. Because again, I still don't necessarily agree with the price, even if I've softened up on it just a little bit. Yes, I am planning on buying a Nintendo Switch 2, because I'd rather have my games played locally than go streaming, because you know what, even in this house, with the top-tier internet that we paid our internet provider for, I'd still get spotty streaming trying to stream from either one of the two machines I have down here at my feet to my laptop. And it's not just an issue with my laptop's internet, it's not just an issue with these two computers' internet, it's just an issue with the internet inside the house in general. Because it's really spotty out here. And not to mention probably an issue with the internet provider too, because if somebody happens to log on to Netflix within this neighborhood, kiss goodbye to anything on the internet. Seriously, that's kind of how it is, and that's the biggest issue right there. But again, if I had to say anything else, like I said, it's something that I would consider with the Nintendo Switch 2, and honestly, I've considered it very hard. And another thing that I also have to say too is that I have a funny feeling that this could be quite literally the last definitive console for Nintendo Switch, or for Nintendo in general, because, well, let's face it, like, gaming's pretty much reaching a peak at this current moment. Like, the PlayStation 5 has nothing that impresses me. Nothing. Quite literally, most of their games are being ported over to PC, which is giving me very little incentive to go out and buy a PlayStation 5. Very, 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 very little. It's not even a thought in my mind to go out and buy a PlayStation 5. The only reason why I'll bring it up is because of an example. And then, of course, you have the Xbox Series X and S. What games do those consoles have? Exactly. See my point? Like, this has been pretty much a generation of absolutely nothing, and honestly, like I said, I think we've reached peak for gaming pretty much within the last year. And I think Nintendo also happens to know that too. So putting more hardware into a system isn't really necessarily going to change too much. In fact, if anything, it's probably going to make developers more lazier and hardware requirements even more ridiculous than they already are from most AAA and, AA developers, Because right now, that's kind of what we're facing right now, is that they're just going like, oh, it's good enough, just ship it. Despite the fact that it requires a god-tier graphics card, the best processor that money can buy, and an questionable amount of RAM. Despite the fact that they could have optimized it to work with 4 gigs of RAM, a GTX 1650, or well, maybe not even just a GTX 1650. Heck, they could have just went for a 1050, because you know what? I think the 1050s are still rather popular cards, aren't they not? I mean, answer me down below in the comments if the 1050 is still a rather popular card. I haven't taken a look at any Steam surveys of recent, but, the 1050 still is a while. I know that the 1050 was pretty much kind of a haymaker back in the day. And then, of course, also, not to mention, I also know that there's still a lot of people who swear by their 3060s, which, of course, the NVIDIA T239 was rumored to be actually about the similar spec of, well, actually more of a 350 more than anything, but, still, like, I was originally thinking it was going to be like a whole handheld 360 inside your hand, where the graphics card was operating the whole thing. Granted, I don't think that's the full case, but still. Like, again, a lot of people are still swearing by their 360s and still sticking with their 3 series, and let's face it, who wants to buy a 5000 series card anyway? Like, seriously, the 50 series might as well be dead because NVIDIA hasn't really necessarily done too much with it. They overcharged and underpromised, and honestly, most of the performance gains are marginal from most field testers. Like, and not to mention, it's also so powerful that even most accessible CPUs can barely handle it, meaning that you need at least a $2,000 rig or above in order to operate it. And if games are going to be aiming for that kind of thing, well, then count me out, because I'd rather not pay for those games. I'd rather pay for games that work on the hardware that I currently have now, or the hardware that I could afford. I'd rather not have to pay for a god-tier system with god-tier prices. I would rather pay for a system that functions and works and does everything that I need it to do. And again, I think that's something that I will say about the Nintendo Switch 2 compared to all the other competitors. Yes, I'm also well aware of Nintendo bricking your consoles if you break their terms of service, which of course happens to include if you pirate anything from your console or modify your console, or if you happen to do anything or hack your console, really. And you know what? This is something that Nintendo isn't impartial to doing. Like, seriously, Nintendo has been doing this stuff for years. Mod your 3DS before the 3DS eShop went down, you had no longer access to the 3DS eShop. I think it was also the same way with the Wii U. Then, of course, not to mention, Nintendo also would brick games if it was detecting any kind of piracy with it whatsoever. Because the Nintendo Switch made a contact to a server, then contacted back to check the QR codes of the game. And if it found 2 different versions in 2 different places, 2 of the same code in 2 different places, it would no longer work. Your game would be kaput, no longer functional, because it's been pirated. And see, again, that's something that I think most people are kind of overlooking. Nintendo has always been very hard to the piracy. Unnecessarily hard. I'm not defending them on this either, because, I think there are moments where they shouldn't have been doing it. Like, for example, when somebody decided to scan the entire Super Mario 64 Japanese manual and upload it online. They decided to take that down. I think that was stupid. Also, the whole Power lawsuit is just dumb beyond belief. It's just game mechanics. People are going to come across them whether you like it or not. Again, like I said, I'm not avidly defending Nintendo here. I do actively criticize them as well, even if it may not seem like it. But again, I will kind of defend the Nintendo Switch 2 because there are some perks to the system that I don't think everybody's readily necessarily knowing. And everybody who's been able to go to the hands-on events, like, I'm actually kind of surprised. There's been a lot more positive reception for the Nintendo Switch 2 than initially thought. even though the price point is a bit of a steep ask. And then, of course, not to mention, we also have the hell with pre-orders, which, yeah, even I participated in that. I watched GameStop's website crash, like, more than once at 8 o'clock, you know? And, you know, it was probably the only time I was going to be able to order a Switch 2 because I wasn't staying up till midnight for that. No way, no how. And, yeah, it wouldn't allow me to get to the pre-order section. I mean, I guess I could have done it in person, but at the same time, I don't think I would have been guaranteed the type of console that I wanted, which was with the Mario Kart 8 bundle, because no way I'm paying $80 for Mario Kart World. Heavens no. And I still want to play Mario Kart World. So, anyway, neither here nor there. The real truth is that basically, no matter which way you look at it, these specs really aren't all that bad. And honestly, again, it's not about the hardware. It's more about what you can do with it. So anyway, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. And of course, if you're new here, please be sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you all in the next video. This is Superchocolatemilkshake, signing off.